I love this question. We don't talk enough about playfulness. This playfulness is part of my nature. I lost a little bit of this playfulness. I started to be very controlled. I have to behave a certain way so that people think I'm professional. And it still takes time for me to let go of this. Perfect. I don't want to make any mistakes. Oh, I want to be perfect. The opposite will happen. You will be very distant. And what people are drawn to is not perfectionism. Quite the contrary. If we see perfect people that are unapproachable, we don't really connect with them. So perfectionism creates distance and not aspiration. If I approach things with playfulness, I allow myself for a little bit of wiggle room, which everybody has. If you are playful, you approach people with curiosity, confidence that people perceive. Because if you're very tight, you're afraid that something will happen. That's not confidence.
Marina, I'm really excited to have you on the Core Impact podcast. And this episode will be a unique episode because we're going to talk about personal and CEO branding. We're going to talk about visibility, how important it is, and especially in the future. The first question I would like to ask you, how can you manage between creating attention-based content and impact-based content?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a banger right from the start. Let's dive right in. So I think the first thing we need to clarify is what is impact-based content and what is attention content. It's always interesting for me that there are so many notions out there and so many theories when it comes to visibility. And sometimes I talk with people about personal branding and I see that although it's not their core business, sometimes they have more ideas and more theories in mind even than I do. Or sometimes I hear theories I've never come across, because there are just so many. And there are so many people who do personal branding and everybody has a little bit their own take on this field. That's what makes it so interesting, but also sometimes makes it very confusing. So, when it comes to impact versus attention, I think what people mean by it is that the one type of content creates impact in the sense of I get to know the real people I want to get to know through it, or I probably make sure that people come to me and say, I want to work with you, or impact can also mean that I put something out in the world that makes people probably think about a certain topic another way. So it's very difficult to understand what impact actually means. And the other thing, attention, is of course, if you start out on LinkedIn or if you start out on any other social media platform, if you don't have a certain level of attention, it will be very difficult for you to create impact. So kind of reaching the right people, getting your message across. So for me, it's not an either or. For me, it has to go together. But what I often see is that people get caught up on LinkedIn in terms of, oh my God, I have to study the LinkedIn algorithm. I have to understand what's the best time to post. I have to understand which hashtags to use and so on and so on. And for me, that's kind of the last thing I would worry about, because the first thing that I would start is with impact. And with impact, what I understand with impact is creating content that is valuable for the target audience you want to reach. So, for example, if I want to reach CEOs, I have to understand what's important for them in terms of communication, the topic that I write about. What is it that they're worried about? What is it that is relevant to them? And I urge everyone who is starting out as a creator on LinkedIn to, first of all, do interviews with their target audience in order to understand what is it that they're really interested about and how can I create value for them. That very first step. Impact always comes first. And if I start to create content that is relevant for my target audience, not for the masses, for my target audience, then I can optimize for reach. That's how I see kind of this interesting game between attention and impact.
Let's stay a bit in this direction, but now, how do you define success when you talk about visibility? Is it based on, like, is there a minimum number of people you have to reach? Or when you say target audience, in this case, even if you reach one person and this person, you're making an impact with this person, and this person may be making impact to, many other people, then it's success. It doesn't have to be a huge number. What do you think?
Yeah, it's also very interesting because success depends on the goal that you have on social media in the first place. Many people start out on LinkedIn with a certain goal in mind. For example, winning the right talents or winning clients or making sure that their company gets more attention, more visibility in the market, or for bigger companies, it's working on the reputation of the company. There are several things that, that can be goals. And the funny thing is that over time, if they are not cautious, they get caught up in this LinkedIn and social media game, which is, oh my God, I see this person over there, a competitor. He has more likes and engagement than I do. And then all of a sudden they leave this route of, I have a clear goal, I have a target audience, and they go into these LinkedIn games in terms of, oh, how can I optimize so that I get more likes and more engagement and so on. And that's not success for me. You can have lots of attention on LinkedIn. You can have lots of likes and engagement, and still you don't reach your business goals because you're probably writing for the wrong audience, or the audience that you want to reach is simply not interested in your content because you optimize for reach and not for impact. So success really comes down to what you want to achieve on this platform and sticking to this goal. For me, for example, success on LinkedIn means that I create valuable content for my target audience. That's number one. Ideally, that this target audience sees, oh, this person is a real expert. Probably she can help me. And then this target audience reaches out to me. That's goal number one. If it happens so that my content also helps people from other target audiences, if it inspires, if it maybe is also, putting a smile on the face of people because it also entails a little bit of humor, that's great. I love it. But that's not goal number one. And being very clear on what you want to achieve on social media is so important.
Again and again, Marina, with different guests, different conversations, different topics, but comes back to clear intention. How important to have a clear intention in whatever you are doing. And
Yes.
I would like to ask you, do you like to share a story, personal story, that shaped the way you think about communication and influence?
Mm-hmm. So I think it was not a single story, but although no, that was a single moment that really changed it. So I started out posting on LinkedIn in 2015. I wasn't posting very consistently. It was very, a little bit of information here, a little bit of information there. It was not very targeted. I was just starting out as a freelancer in communications, and had the first clients that I worked with on personal branding. And because I started out working with CEOs, I I had this sense of it has to be very professional. I have to be very professional, and professional means to be, a little bit conservative, don't share too much, um, share lots of expertise, but don't share too much about yourself. Like, you as a consultant have to be in the background. And that's how I used LinkedIn for many years. And then I think it was 2018 or 2019, I'm not quite sure. I was invited to a podcast, and oh no, it had to be 2020, because and that time during the pandemic, my book came out, and I was invited to the podcast because of this book, and the host read my book, which, if you translate it, would say digital personal branding on the courage to be visible. And he asked, well, Marina, you say in your book, it's important to have this courage to be visible. It's important to not only share expertise, but also a little bit of personality, a little bit of things about yourself, because you see yourself on LinkedIn that this is something that works very well. We don't want only to understand what the expertise of the person is. We want to know if we can trust this person. Want to create some sympathy. Um, and the funny thing is, and then he said it, and I'm really glad he did. He challenged me, and he said, "So you say personality is also an important part of personal branding, but you don't do it yourself." And I'm like, holy shit, you're right. You're right. Like, I did share a little bit of personality, but not much. It was like, it was very little. And when he said that to me, it was like a mirror. And I understood that I can actually start to probably show a little bit more of myself as well. Like, taking people with me behind the scenes, showing a little bit more about my work, to also create trust, not only expertise, but trust. Because if you only share expertise, well, people don't really know. So why should I trust her? Uh, so that was very interesting, and it definitely changed how I view personal branding, and how I view especially my own personal branding and what I share on LinkedIn.
Marina, is there also a tip or anything in mind? You say, if I want to post on LinkedIn, let's say, if I want to share some of my personality, I have one post, for example, about my personality versus 3 posts about content or something like this. How do you manage this? Or it just comes natural?
hmm So I would say, if I would have to give like a percentage, I would say make sure that 70-80% is expertise.
Mm,
Maybe every fifth post can be something more personal. But in the end, I wouldn't even really completely discriminate between, on the one hand, this is like a post completely on expertise, and here is a post that is completely personal. I would try to bring a little bit of personal views, perspective, observations into every expert post as well.
mm,
So, for example, I could write, so these are the 3 tips on leadership today. And the thing is, especially in times of ChatGPT, everybody could write this kind of post. But as soon as you start to write something like, this is the thing that I learned from my first leader, or these are the things that I learned from my worst boss and the best boss I've ever had. This makes it more personal. It makes it more interesting. And this is something that ChatGPT can't completely duplicate, because this is your experience. So I wouldn't even say it has to be one or the other. I would try to bring in a little bit of personal view into your expert posts.
There is another question I'm interested to know from you, that you help leaders and CEOs to be visible. How do you help them when you see that some of them might be afraid of criticism or being seen as showing off?
hmm Yeah, that's a good question. So A lot of times when I speak with people, they think, oh, okay, so a top manager, they're not afraid of criticism. They're communicating all the time. But the thing is, even they are very afraid. Maybe they're even more afraid because, they're always on a silver platter. The media is always watching what they're doing. Employees are always watching what they're doing, clients as well, investors. So it's totally understandable that most of them are very cautious. And there has been a very interesting shift within the last 10 years in CEO branding, which I observe. When I started out in 2015, it was very, very conservative. Like, let's not post too much. Let's not communicate too much. Let's kind of communicate what the company is communicating, and that's it. And then over the next years, a couple of CEOs that like CEO Tim Höttges of Deutsche Telekom started to show a little bit of things behind the scenes, giving his opinion on things, giving statements that were more personal and not only something that the company wrote. So that was a very interesting shift. And once this started happening, you could see that the attention of stakeholders also increased. They found it much more interesting to have statements of the CEO himself or herself instead of just the corporate communication on LinkedIn. So that was interesting. And having these first movers also enabled other CEOs to follow suit and to share a little bit more personal things, not private, but personal things. And that changed the CEO communication landscape massively. So that's great. Also with LinkedIn, for the first time in history, they have the opportunity to post something or say something without waiting for media or some podcast or event to invite them. Like they had a channel they could use themselves 24/7. So that's a huge shift in communication we saw. But still today, of course, there's a lot of caution around CEO branding, and for a good reason. Because as we saw in the past with companies like Tesla, you see that if the CEO goes rogue on X or on former Twitter, the entire the stock market is reacting. So they have to be careful. And usually there is an entire team of communications expert around the CEO in order to see what can we share, what can't we share. Because also you have lots of stakeholders you have to think about before you share something, and have to keep every stakeholder in mind. So yeah, it's definitely something that you have to be cautious about.
So you help them by kind of acknowledging that this is something that is okay to be kind of afraid of, but
Mhm.
but yeah, to deal with it cautiously, and this is normal because everyone feels like this. Even the biggest CEOs, I mean, the highest positions they can think of, people taking big positions in big companies, they all feel like this, so it's normal. This is how you deal with it, kind of, right?
Yeah, they don't have to be afraid. I don't want them to completely pull back and don't post anything and don't share anything. But you have to make it very smart because, people like you and we have a little bit of wiggle room. I can post something and maybe it won't be perfect, but because I'm not in a very high position, people won't judge me as
Mm,
harshly as they
mm,
would judge a CEO. Um, so it's a very interesting game of like being human, showing a little bit of the human side, but also being very professional and being very thoughtful about what you share. And that's what
mm,
makes this discipline, like personal branding for CEOs, so extremely interesting.
mm. Marina, how do you deal with self-doubt when you put yourself out there?
Oh my God, I have so many posts that I wrote that I haven't published yet.
Oh,
Like so many, because
wow.
sometimes I have an idea, I write something, it feels totally right in my mind, and then I
Uh,
see it written out. And sometimes a lot of posts I share with my co-founder, just to, to know, okay, so this is what I think, but how does it come across? Because communication is not only what you say, it's always what the other person perceives.
uh,
So it's always important to have this in mind, and have probably a buddy that you can share your content with. But yeah, I do have this doubt, definitely, especially if it's posts that I care a lot about, if it's not only strictly expertise posts, but if it's maybe a little bit more personal posts where I'm not sure, am I allowed to show this, the side of me? Is it allowed to be a little bit more vulnerable? Yeah, I still have lots of posts I haven't published yet, and that's okay. It's a
uh,
process, and um, you have to feel at least 80% comfortable.
uh,
And that's what I try to say, to teach people, is to not waiting for the perfect post or feeling 100% comfortable, because this time might never come, especially in the beginning when you doubt yourself a lot. Um, but coming to a place where you feel comfortable enough, and then just start out, and then you will see that nothing bad happens if
uh,
you post something on LinkedIn. Yeah. And
uh,
also, actually not take ourselves that damn serious. We
uh,
are not, public figures. Yeah, like if we post something, yeah, of course there will be a couple of colleagues, friends, whatsoever, who will
uh.
look at it and have an opinion. It's okay, nothing bad will happen.
When you're talking about public figures and like, even you reminded me of Gary Vee actually,
Oh yeah.
and and what he says is it doesn't matter even if you have the highest position in the whole world, you to be really free and to be authentic, just post wherever you think is valuable, is helpful, and there's nothing to worry about. At the same time, and you know this, many times when we talk about people with high positions have the responsibility, some posts could backfire. So
Hmm.
how can you manage now between the two? Because you want to be authentic at the same time, and you want to, share your values personally, and also this will reflect on the how people see the whole company when you are in a leading position. So how
Hmm.
can you balance between both?
Hmm. So in terms of being a CEO, you have to look at both your personal brand and the corporate brand. And there's always like a field where both intertwine, and that's kind of your playing field. That's
Mm,
where you can communicate. Um, if a CEO would start to talk about values in terms of something that is absolutely not relevant for the company, something that probably doesn't align with the company's values, that can be very difficult.
mm,
But within the company's values, like for example, let's say the company um, is currently making a shift towards being more green, having more green energy, and so on. And if you, as a CEO, say that's something I care deeply about, and that's why I have also in my private life certain initiatives I take to live a more sustainable life. Great, talk about it. That's amazing. Like find this common theme.
mm. And this is also an interesting point to know, like how to separate between personal brand and corporate brand. So you only share things that are obviously matching between both, right? Because many times I see also lots of either CEOs, they post for or reshare, repost from their company, what like the company what is posting, and the other way around. So in this case, do you say that it is a good practice to do this, or no? Like just keep it separated. How much you separate or merge between both?
Hmm. So it also depends on how long you've been communicating on LinkedIn. If you just start out, take it slow.
Mm,
Like, be in this field where corporate brand and personal brand intertwine. And first of all, find out what your personal brand actually is. Find your positioning. That's exactly where we start working with the CEOs. Um, that's where you start, create a safe space. If you're just starting out to take dance lessons, you won't go to, I don't know, to a party and throw out like an impressive tango or whatsoever. It won't
mm,
happen. You
mm,
first you have to learn the rules, and then you can freestyle. So there is room for freestyling, but not in the beginning.
mm. So there are two things in mind now. I'm gonna start with one. Is there are some studies that show that 60% of professionals struggle with expressing or communicating about what makes them unique. And since you are
Hmm.
also very interested in communication, why do you think that, or it is one of your expertise, why do you think that professionals struggle with sharing their own story, their own talents, and knowing about them,
Hmm.
articulate them in the right way?
Hmm. I'm even surprised it's only 60%, because I would have thought it's probably 90%.
Oh,
Um, and in my opinion, it totally makes sense, because we grow up um, with just studying the things that, school is giving us. We study, study, study. I don't know how about your school life, but I didn't have any, school experience where they asked about my strengths, or where they helped me to find out what I'm especially good at. Like, yeah, of course you got grades, but it
uh,
doesn't mean you're particularly well in one field or bad in another field. And even if you're good in math, what are the skills behind it? Or other things that makes you really great or stand out, and so whatsoever. Like, it's a very limited view of a person, right? So we never learn it. And also the thing is, when we use our strength, after a certain time, it seems absolutely normal to us. And that's why many people can't say what their strengths are, because we use them every day and they seem totally normal to us.
uh,
Like, we
uh,
don't see whether we do it better or worse than others. Yeah. So that's the second problem. And the third problem is, and I have a problem with this thing of what makes you unique, or what's your unique selling proposition, your USP. I have a problem with that, because then people start to search for single skills that they do better than everyone else. And that's not possible in most cases, unless you're a wunderkind in some area. But let's face it, with so many people on this planet, there will be one person at least who is better at playing the piano, for example.
uh,
So in my opinion, it's not about having this pressure of finding the one thing you're better at than anyone else. It's about kind of taking a whole picture on all the skills, all the experiences, all the knowledge, also the network that you have, the relationships you have, taking this all together, understanding, like taking stock, really writing down what are all the things that I can do. I call it the superpowers.
uh,
And standing, how can I align them? How can I use certain superpowers um, and put them together like Legos, in order to create something really, really interesting out there, And
uh,
it's not a single skill; it's the combination, maybe even the unique combination of certain skills that makes you really interesting, that creates an interesting personal brand.
uh.
And the sooner you start to understand what skills, what experiences, and so on, what superpowers you have available, and what superpowers you might want to build up next, the better it is. Not only for your personal brand, but for your career goals in general.
Uh, you also, Marina, now reminded me of Shadi Zahari, if I'm saying her name right, that we forget about our own skills because
Mhm.
when you are skilled at something, then you do it very often, then you forget that it's a skill. So this is a
Yeah.
point also. This is a point, and the other one is not to compare. When you look at your uniqueness, it's somehow we fell like most people fell into the trap of comparing with others, but it's about you, as you say, and what makes you unique, what skills you have, and usually it's not about one thing, it's about the whole portfolio, like combining everything. And is it
Yeah.
something also that you work with your clients, like when you, how do you mix between being visible and looking at their talents? What are some of the practices you do to discover
Mhm.
their treasures?
So that's a very nice question. So it's really different depending on who you work with. So my clients are CEOs who usually know very well
Mm,
what they can do, can't, what their strengths are, and so on, because they've done lots of tests in the past um, and got lots of feedback in the past. So it's easier to work with them on those superpowers. But what I find more interesting is to work with students because I also teach at Frankfurt School here in Frankfurt. And there you have lots of MBA students. And I also talk with them about their superpowers. And usually what I see is that it's very difficult for them to start writing down the skills, the experiences they have. So there's one tool that I always share with them. It won't bring you to your superpowers instantly, but over time, it's a very, very good tool. And it's called the jar of happiness. I have it here on my table. I can show it.
mm,
Looks like that. It's a simple jar, which I have since 5 years now. And every time I get a feedback, a compliment, I write it on a piece of paper and I put it in there.
mm,
And the funny thing is, after a while, when I open it after a couple of months, I start to see patterns. I start to see what people value in me when we work together.
mm,
And that's a very important indicator of your powers. So that's a nice tool.
mm. Marina, you worked with hundreds of CEOs, right? What is the 1 to 3 common blind spots you'd like to share when talking about visibility and personal branding and CEO branding?
hmm So the blind spot, especially of CEOs, number one is the importance of personality and passion um, instead of sheer expertise. Um, because they grow up in a world where it says, yeah, you have to share expertise, you have to be valuable, and so on and so on. And usually lots of CEOs today are engineers.
Mm,
So they learn to communicate very technically. But if you communicate only technically, if you only communicate with numbers, with data, and so on, you will have a very hard time reaching people.
While you are listening to the Core Impact podcast, please take a moment to pause and share with me. How do you feel? Are you enjoying the conversation, feeling inspired, or something else? I would love to know your feelings in the comments.
Is not a bad thing. But the thing is, there are a couple of components missing. And what I really, really like, in order to make it clear, what I mean is the old philosopher Aristotle. He already had 3 ingredients for good communication. First of all, is logos. which I just mentioned. So it's logical, it's data, it's numbers, and so on. All the things that CEOs already do. Second of all is ethos. So ethos means, are you a person that I trust? Like the things that you say, do you walk the talk? You know, this you can share by telling stories, like making it a little bit more, um, make it a little bit more vivid, more interesting. Like not only sharing, oh, these are the values that I have, but sharing a story that underlines that you have those values.
Mm.
And the third ingredient, next to logos, ethos, is pathos. And this is passion, like talking in a way that people believe what you say, having a little bit more excitement about what you say. And it's not only about how you use your voice, it's also about how you use your body language. It's how you look at the audience, if you communicate with them. And if those three things, those three ingredients come together, you have a better communication, a communication that really reaches people, not only here, but also here.
Mm.
And that's great. So these are usually the things that I work on with CEOs. That's the first blind spot. I would say the second blind spot is um, definitely social media communication. You know, they're used to interviews, they're used to standing in front of lots and lots of employees in internal town halls. But social media is a different kind of communication. The people are the same. You still have, you know, the same stakeholders that you can reach, but you have to do it in a different way. That's why when I started out my business, I focused solely on LinkedIn because that was the biggest blind spot in the communication of CEOs.
Mm.
Like using the communication they have on other platforms, but learning how to communicate, yeah, in a different country, if you so want. So yeah, I would say these are the two biggest blind spots.
Mm. Thank you, Marina. There is one thing that you just mentioned, and I'm curious to know how do you see it, which is body language. We talk about communication.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's overestimated
You
because,
do?
yes, because I was in Toastmasters, for 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
It could be sometimes body language is, yes, maybe now I'm aware of how I'm moving, then I think about it. But when I do it like without unconsciously, it becomes a habit, then it's something that's, I think, extra add on. But the most important thing, and this is also something I heard from another source, I forgot the name, that the most important thing is what we started with, the intention. This is the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing. But people usually think about the last thing, which is how do I show up instead of why am I talking? So what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's very important. Having the intention, why do you show up? And usually people are very good detectors.
Hmm.
They can, they kind of see what your intention is, um, without even you having to say it. So I would agree on that. On the other hand, I see a lot of people who have good intentions, but because they are nervous or because they're probably not too aware of kind of what their body is doing, because usually we observe the body language of others. That's why we are so good at decoding the body language of others, but we rarely see ourselves in interaction with others because we don't talk to a mirror, we talk to people. um, so a lot of times we are extremely unaware of what our body is doing. And if we are nervous or if we are not aware of certain things that our body is doing, it might um, undermine the things that we are saying. And this is also something I think very German. We put so
Very
much
German,
effort.
interesting.
Maybe probably it's the same everywhere, but I see, because I live in Germany, I see it in Germany a lot. Um, they're so aware about what they are saying. You know, I see it every time I'm sitting in the audience and somebody is presenting something. Even before they go on stage, I see them outside at the coffee spot, and they're still studying their cards. Like, okay, and then I say that, and then I say this, and they put so much emphasis on this. And then they go on stage. They are probably nervous. They have no idea what their feet are doing or what their hands are doing. You know, one thing that I, for example, am now aware of since I have saw videos of me on stage is that I do strange things with my hands. You
Mm.
know, sometimes they're like this and then this, like very strange. And now that I know this, I can work on it so it doesn't look so weird. And of course, it's not something that will make or break your talk if everything else was fine. But I just want to I want to make sure that people not only work on what they're saying, but that they're ideally record themselves or they practice in front of a mirror so that their body language is not saying something different than what their mouth is saying.
Mm. 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 Yeah. And I think now, after talking to you, sometimes I say something and then I reflect on it. Maybe the way I said it was not optimal, let's say, because body language itself cannot be overestimated, maybe the way people see it. So it's not only about movements, but about being in alignment, as you say, like who are you and how you show up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, then when you start being aware of everything, including your body, but not only body language as how people will see you, but also
Mm-hmm.
you feel inside your body, and then this you will express it outside, then
Mm-hmm.
the message will be much more powerful, right?
Absolutely. And for example, and I've been guilty of that as well. I would come to an event where I would hold a speech and I would study my cards and what I want to say, like right in front of the stage. Um, and that's not helpful. What I do now is I arrive early, like maybe 2 hours early. I get familiar with the people who are there. I'm, mixing into the crowd. I get a feeling for the people and I start to relax.
Mhm.
And that helps my body to relax as well and have a more confident body language when I step in front of those people.
Mhm.
So I think it's both. I think it's what you say, that it's really about how you feel on the inside will manifest in your body language, but it's also helpful to understand what your body is doing. If you're stressed or if you're relaxed, or maybe certain things you just learn because you're a human being. You observe, you learn, you have certain habits, um, and being aware of those and maybe working off a couple of things that you don't want to have in your body language can be also very helpful.
Mhm. How can you be playful? This is something I would like to know from you personally. How can you be playful? Because something I noticed that you focus on, or not focus on, just like live, in
Hmm.
a playful way. Especially that you talked about, it's not about stereotyping, kind of, uh, but I know that in the German mentality,
Hmm.
there is lots of focus on the mind, on what you say, on logic. And
Hmm.
things when you try to be playful, you might be perceived as someone who's not serious, who's not professional. So how can you
Oh.
bring this into your job and into your life in general and communications?
Oh, I love it. I love this question. I love it so much. And I think we don't talk enough about playfulness. Um, so maybe first of all, why is playfulness so important to me? Um, there are videos of me when I was a little girl. I was about 3 or 4, and I gave concerts to the entire neighborhood. Not because I had a talent, but because I had fun and
Mm.
because I wanted to. So this playfulness is I think part of my nature. And then I went to school, and then it was all very strict, and you have to learn this and this and this. And now in hindsight, I can say that I lost a little bit of this playfulness. I started to be very controlled, I have to write perfect scores, and I have to behave a certain way so that people think I'm professional. And it still takes time for me to let go of this. Because what happens if you are not playful? What happens if you're very controlled? What happens is you connect not well with other people, because if you're very controlled and very tight, you don't have much to give. And people think, oh, okay, don't approach. Um, it's also the same if you say, oh, I want to be perfect. I don't want to make any mistakes. That's what's essentially being very controlled means. And also if you approach, for example, keynotes or any presentation you give, if you approach it with a sense of, oh, I want to be perfect, the opposite will happen. you will be very distant. And what people are drawn to is not perfectionism. Quite the contrary. If we see perfect people that are unapproachable, we don't approach them, and we don't really connect with them. So perfectionism creates distance and not aspiration. It's not something I want to go towards to. And also being perfectionist and being very unplayful, it makes horrible keynotes and horrible presentations because you're very tight. So playfulness is for me kind of the antidote to this perfectionism, to this being very controlled. Playfulness, if I approach things with playfulness, I allow myself for a little bit of wiggle room, which everybody has. You don't have to be perfect. If you are playful, you're also a little bit more curious. You approach people with curiosity, with questions, and in turn, they will open up a little. It's a great tool. And in my opinion, humor and playfulness are absolutely not standing in the way of professionalism. Quite the contrary. If you have a little bit of playfulness, it even increases the level of confidence that people perceive. Because if you're very tight, you're afraid that something will happen. That's not confidence, right? But being a little bit more playful is very confident and therefore very professional. So yeah, I could talk on this for hours. I think it's a very neglected. I wouldn't even say skill. It's a very neglected way to approach business and life in general.
This is something I like to comment after what you said. Is you reminded me of also being in a creation mode. I realized it myself. Even to be honest, when I started talking to you now this morning, in the beginning, I felt like I was like worried about myself, like how am I showing up, etc. But once I started being okay, just like we are having conversation, I'm getting to know someone with their experience, their stories, which is something that I love. Let's just be, get
Mm-hmm.
out of me. I don't have to be perfect, because
Mm-hmm.
once I'm in this perfection mode, and then I am in the survival mode, and this
Mm-hmm.
feel this tense, and then they will not be connected with me, and then we don't have this trust when you were talking about before. But
Mm-hmm.
I start being okay. Just there's nothing wrong. I mean, I cannot do anything wrong with it. We just
Absolutely. And that's so
direct.
human. And
Yeah.
that's so human. And I think it's always such a shame sometimes if you are at networking events. And I mean, let's be honest, networking events are work. You are there, you don't know the people. I'm always a little awkward at events because I don't know, well, what shall I say first? And maybe the other person doesn't want to have small talk. Maybe the person thinks I'm weird for saying certain things. And that's okay if we embrace this weirdness. It's awesome. It makes for so much better conversations. and especially not judging people within the first 5 minutes you meet them, because the person might be nervous. I'm nervous too. If both are nervous, both are not opening up, you know, but going past these first 5 minutes, and then you start to see maybe some more magic happens if you also have the courage to open up a little. Um, so yeah, that would be a better world if we wouldn't judge, within the first 5 minutes, just listen, just, allowing ourselves to open up bit by bit and to relax a little more.
Marina, I like to always end the podcast with focusing on the future. And the question now always with the future is AI, which you mentioned also already. How do you see AI changing personal branding in the future?
So AI is definitely something that will help, for sure, if you know how to use it correctly. What AI can do is being very efficient in terms of giving you probably even more ideas, helping you write stuff, helping you create stuff. But what AI can't do is really working on your positioning, working on who am I, how do I want to show up to the world. And also AI can help you in the digital world, and you should use it. But the real connections still happen in the real world. So still learning about body language, about voice, about just in general how to be a nice person to talk to so that other people feel well in your company, feel good in your company. These are so important skills, and they will, become even more important in the AI world.
Marina, I'm very grateful and happy to have this conversation with you, to get inspired by so many things that you talked about. And I have some questions I wanted to ask you. And after talking to you, I had some more follow-up questions. So there are many things that I didn't ask you, but it's great. Like the things that we talk about, of course, personal branding, visibility from a different view for me, and how to make impact when you are also visible. What are the things that you have to be aware of, let's say, when you go out there, and how to manage, always have the balance between being authentic and at the same time being responsible. And we talked about communication skills, we talked about also AI. And from everything you said, is there any last message you would like to emphasize, or thoughts you want to share, or something else that we haven't mentioned but you think is important to talk about?
So the one message I always like to leave with people is to work on your communication skills, because your communication skills will determine how your relationships will form in life, whether it's in private, whether it's in business. And the relationships in your life, in turn, will determine the quality of your life. There are studies that show that relationships are the main predictor of happiness in life. So yeah, work on communication. It's so important. And even especially if you think that you're a strong communicator, challenge that and still work on it. I know that I will work my entire life on my communication. I'll never be done, because there's so much to be learned. And I think it's a field that is also very interesting, because it's a tool. Through your communication, you also understand better things like just how you as a person work, and how you connect better with others. I think it's a very noble pursuit.
Marina, there is one optional question you can answer if you have it, which is a question. Something that you've been reflecting on, you're interested to have a new perspective about, that you would like to ask someone about it, will be one of my future guests. So what is the question that you are reflecting on, you're curious to know more about, and you want someone to answer your question?
Wow, that's a big one. Uh, what is the question? One of the questions that I'm always curious about, and I discuss it a lot with friends. Um, how do you challenge? How do you balance your imposter syndrome, like your insecurities and all the things that everybody has? How do you balance that with confidence and moving ahead?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's something I'm always pondering because I'm not free of doubt and, questioning myself. But sometimes you have to learn a way to deal with it and to move forward. Um, yeah, and that's always a constant balance in life. So maybe it's always interesting to see how it is for other people.
Okay, then we do this. Thank you very much, Marina. I enjoyed the talk with you again. And yeah, hopefully we stay in touch and maybe we have another talk in the future.
Hopefully, and very much looking forward to see the talk online and listening to more episodes that you put out. I've listened to a couple of episodes you've did in the past,
Mm.
so yeah, please continue. I really like listening to it.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Omar.
While you are listening to the Core Impact podcast, please take a moment to pause and share with me. How do you feel? Are you enjoying the conversation? Feeling inspired or something else? I would love to know your feelings in the comments.